This is Lunchtime Agenda.
Hello and welcome to Lunchtime Agenda. I'm Laura Jays. We are standing by to bring you some comments from the Prime Minister, Tony Abbott, who's been in a cabinet meeting this morning. And then later in the program, the Finance Minister, Matthias Cormann, will be holding a media conference to, quote, outline the budget challenges ahead. Today, there's been plenty of disquiet and really disquiet for much of the week about the government's proposed debt levy from the public, business groups and privately. Many MPs are expressing strong reservations. Today, Teresa Gambaro, the LNP member for Brisbane, spoke out against it and what seems to be a growing revolt. She says and warned if it goes ahead, it would be a breach of promise that would have a devastating impact on the economy. But one of her senior Liberal colleagues has given her some advice and warned her not to preempt what's in the budget.
Well, look, Teresa's a backbencher and she's entitled to talk about issues that she wants to, but I think it would be wise for Teresa to wait until next Tuesday to start expressing views of the budget until she's seen the entire budget. So it seems a little preemptive for her to be commenting publicly in the media about something she doesn't know the detail of.
Now, Teresa Gambaro is well within her rights and the party rules to express such a view, but it does seem unhelpful, even as it provides fodder for the opposition.
We've heard the member for Brisbane, a member of Parliament, make some comments and be very publicly told by her party colleagues to shut up until next week. There's nothing robust about that debate.
Shadow Minister Shane Newman joins me now from Brisbane, and Dan Tehan, Liberal MP from Melbourne. Now, Dan Tehan, first to you. There's been a lot of talk about this debt levy. Would you be comfortable with this being introduced if it hit high-income earners, those earning $180,000?
Well, Laura, it's not the right way to go about it for me to say what is going to be or not in the budget. I think we do have to wait till next Tuesday. Cabinet was meeting today to finalise the budget, so all this speculation about what may or may not be in it, I think we're just sort of guessing about things, hypothetical. So I think the best thing we can all do is just wait till Tuesday on this, because as we've seen over the last couple of weeks, there's been a lot speculated in the media about what may or may not be in the budget. And I think really we can just play a lot of games. Let's just wait till next Tuesday, see what's in it. The point that we are continually making from our side is that we have to go back to first base and say, why are we here in the first place? And that's because Labor got us in this mess, and that's what we do have to remember. It was the Labor Party that put us in the situation where we are. We don't want to be here, but we have to do what is right for our children. And my view is this will be a budget which is about the future and making sure our children aren't the ones that bear the future burden of what the Labor Party did in the last 5 to 6 years.
The political aspect of this aside and the broken promise, as an economic rationalist though, if we could speak hypothetically, can you see the merit in having a debt levy?
Well, there is no doubt that the best type of politics is good policy. Good policy is good politics, and I'm absolutely certain that the Prime Minister and the Treasurer know this, and that is how they will frame this budget. It will be about what is right for this nation, what is right for future generations. They understand that we saw bad policy, and that was bad politics by the previous Labor government. I fully believe that they understand that good policy is good politics,
so
and that is what we will see in this budget.
So is a debt tax good policy, Dan Tehan?
Well, we'll have to wait and see the context of what comes out on next Tuesday. I don't want to speculate on what the budget may or may not look like. Cabinet is obviously finalising it at the moment, so we just don't know what's in it. So let's wait and see what happens next Tuesday. But from what we have said in the lead up to the election, what we've done since we've been in government, everything has been about the future of this nation, about making sure that our children won't hold the burden of our generation.
Okay, Shane Newman, it seems that Labor would ordinarily support this, at least philosophically. Is this just about punishing Tony Abbott politically like he did to you in opposition?
No, this is about the coalition breaching a solemn promise they made before the election about no changes to pensions, no cuts to education, no cuts to health and no tax rises. So this is all about a confected, a manufactured budget crisis. Look, they're in government. They've actually increased the debt and deficit in this country by the decisions they've made since they came to power in September. This is all about the politics. Now, we didn't make up this budget speculation. This is about media drops, comments and commentary by the Leader of the House, and also by the Treasurer and also by the Prime Minister.
So broken promises,
they've done that. They're the ones who dropped it.
Can you see the economic argument for imposing such a levy?
I not often agree with former Treasurer Peter Costello, but what they've done here is actually break the promise. Now, if indeed their policy is to undertake these cuts, as they've been speculating about, and cut jobs and services and funding, cut education, cut health, cut Indigenous health, cut funding across the board, and increase people's taxes. This is not the way to re-stimulate the economy. This is not the way to undertake good economic policies and to solemn breach of the trust that they took to the last election. Tony Abbott's asking people to hold him to one standard and hold Labor to another standard when we're in government.
Okay, I want to look at some more specific parts of what has been floated about this budget, particularly some issues in the Commission of Audit. But first, something that has been confirmed is the rising in the pension age to 70 by 2035. Now, the biggest concern seems to be the argument around those doing physical work. So, Dan Tehan, first to you, would you support a pension system where it was tiered, for example, having different pension ages depending on what industry you're in?
Look, I think that the problem in setting those sort of specifics is you run into grey areas the whole time. I think we've got to be clear here. We do have a population which is ageing, but the health of the population is improving as it ages. So I think we're being fiscally responsible in moving the pension age to 70 over an extended period of time. I think that makes a lot of fiscal sense. I think what we'll need to do is deal with the individual circumstances once we start to see the pension age rise. I think sort of talking about these grey areas, remembering that this pension rise won't occur until the next couple of decades. I think we've got to be careful about what we sort of rule in and out around that rise at this stage.
Yeah, Dan Tehan, Germany does have a tiered system, for example, and there is a mechanism in Germany's economy whereby if you started work at 18 and you work for 45 years, you're then eligible for the pension. Is that something that can be considered here? Should it just be a blanket pension age raised to 70 by 2035? I know you're talking about grey areas there, but do you anticipate that's something the government can address?
Well, look, I think, as we get nearer to the time when we see the pension age increase, we can start to consider some of these issues, look to see what happens in other countries. But the problem is that the more you make exemptions, the more you create issues with what you're trying to do. So I think, at this stage, what we need to be doing is just forecasting that this is what the direction the government is heading in, and then as we get nearer the time, we can look at some of the more specifics and deal with those issues on an individual basis as we need to.
Shane Newman, I'll get you to respond to that as well, this not being a black and white issue, whether we should have a tiered system, but also on superannuation. I think there's something like 80% of people at a pension age, even if they do have superannuation, 80% of people are still at least relying on a part pension. Would that, to you, Shane Newman, suggest that perhaps the system isn't working as well as it should be?
Well, we don't support, for a start, the increase in pension age from proposed 67 years in 2023 to 70 years of age. If you're a nurse in an aged care facility or a construction site, it's very difficult for you to do that manual style labour.
But what's the difference between working to 67 and 70? Is there a huge change in health and lifestyle between those 3 years? Where's the evidence?
As we get older, our bones become more brittle,
Sure.
our physical capacities become more limited, and we think this is appropriate to increase the age to 67, staggered over time. But it's the case that only 24% of people aged 65 to 69 years of age are actually working in the workforce. Dan's been in favour of raising this pension age. He wrote an article about this on the Drum and the ABC on the 4th of April. And the Coalition have been in favour of this since the election. But before the election, Tony Abbott said nothing about this. This is another betrayal by Tony Abbott, a breach of the trust, and it gets down to that fundamental issue of character and integrity that Tony Abbott's breached. On superannuation,
it's not a breach of trust because
we got rid of the 70-year-old cap on co-contributions on superannuation guarantee, by the way. We got rid of that so people 70 years of age and older can actually get superannuation under us. But the Coalition is pausing the superannuation increases above 9% and making it more difficult for older Australians to get the financial security they need and deserve, and yet at the same time making it more difficult to actually get the pension by raising the age. So there's a double whammy for older Australians.
Okay, Dan, I'll let you respond to that, but also if you could address the issue of super. Do you think perhaps looking at the super, the architecture of it, should that be a second-term priority for the Abbott government?
Yeah, so just on the pension, it's not a breach of trust and it's ridiculous to say so. I mean, there will be at least 3 or 4 elections before those pension increases start to become a reality. So people will be able to vote to decide whether they want this policy to go ahead or not. With regards to superannuation, in particular taxation around superannuation, this is something that our taxation review, I believe, will need to look at, because when we have a fundamental look at our taxation system, we're going to have to make sure that our taxation system is working in all areas, including in the area of superannuation, because as we've seen, it's becoming more and more important that Australians can fund their own retirement, and making sure we have the best taxation system to ensure that's a reality is very important.
But Dan, there has to be significant...
That'd be fine, Laura,
hang on, Dan, there has to be significant change when it comes to super, though, doesn't it? If 80% of pension age, those of a pension age are still at least relying on a part pension, that's a significant challenge ahead, isn't it?
A very significant challenge ahead. You're absolutely right. And if you have a look around the world, this is something that other countries are starting to grapple with as well, because with an ageing population, how we fund people's retirement is becoming an issue which is policymakers globally are trying to deal with. It's going to put a huge burden on current taxation bases, and this is going to be one of the issues that countries across the globe are going to have to deal with and come up with solutions for.
Yeah, this is something that particularly in the UK they're grappling with at the moment and talking about the pension age as well. Shane Newman, just more generally on another recommendation made out of the Commission of Audit that hasn't got a lot of airtime, and that was that Tony Shepherd said perhaps when you hand down a budget, it shouldn't be a 4-year forward estimate, it should be a 10-year plan. Now, Labor did make some headway with this, with 2 key policies, the Gonski School reforms and the NDIS. Would you support that being across the board?
Well, we haven't made any proposals to change beyond the 4 years, but we did make commitments on Gonski, which the Coalition have rejected. We did make commitments on superannuation. I heard Dan talking about superannuation. The Liberals would have more credibility on superannuation if they ever voted in favour of a superannuation rise for Australian taxpayers and citizens. There's never been a superannuation proposal put by a Labor government that the coalition supported. And in the last parliament we saw that, where they voted against the rise in the superannuation guarantee. Now, pausing that is exactly the wrong thing to do. It takes the very point that you're making, Laura, in relation to superannuation.
Sorry, Shane Newman, I am going to have to break in there. Sorry to interrupt.